Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools, and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being, and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being.
Welcome to the 307th episode of the award-winning Diverse Minds podcast. Last episode, I spoke about how yoga mats won't fix burnout. If you listened to the episode, did you enjoy it? Did any of it resonate with you? Let me know via the details at the end of the show. Don't forget, the podcast is now fortnightly, but if you're missing weekly content, you have 6 years worth of podcasts to listen to. And if you want my handy guide that lists the episodes with a clickable link, you can get it at diverseminds.co.uk/downloads. So imagine you work in HR. An employee comes to you in tears, sharing personal struggles. Do you listen empathetically, rush them out the real or digital door, or do you redirect them to professional support? Where's the line between caring, not caring, and overstepping? Have you ever felt like a therapist in your HR role? How do you manage it, and how easy is this for you? Emotion researchers generally define empathy as the ability to sense other people's emotions, what they're going through, alongside the ability to imagine or connect with what someone else might be thinking or feeling. Empathy builds trust, psychological safety, and engagement, and it helps HR professionals resolve conflicts more effectively because they can connect with the individual and not just look at the policies and procedures, identify underlying issues of burnout, discrimination, things that have gone untoward or wrong, and escalate them, and foster a culture where employees feel heard and valued. Now, boundaries, this is a big word. It is used everywhere, and it's a very Gen Z thing. And I think often people do confuse boundaries with kindness, in the sense that, well, I can't do that because I've got boundaries. And sometimes we just have to be kind, and we just have to step out and do a little bit extra for someone. But it is really important, of course, in the workplace to have boundaries, because clear limits define what is and isn't your responsibility as any professional, but in particular in HR, because they do protect both you and the employee. HR boundaries refer to the professional limits and legal frameworks governing interactions, confidentiality, and working hours. And I just want to stop and mention confidentiality because, of course, it is very important. But what I often find is confidentiality is used as a smokescreen. So, oh, no, I can't tell you because it's confidential. And yet truly confidential things like people's medical records or their private disability information, not accessibility information, seems to be widely shared. But if it's working well, then the boundaries are designed to prevent conflicts of interest, protect employee well-being, and mitigate legal risks such as workplace harassment or discrimination claims. Now, that really depends on the context and the situation. But clearly, if someone is being harassed or discriminated against at work, things do have to be stepped up. But in essence, empathy without boundaries can result in compassion fatigue, and many of us have been there, haven't we? And boundaries without empathy is just cold transactional HR. And the ideal place, if we were to draw a Venn diagram of this, is I care about your well-being and my own well-being, and my role is to connect you with the right support. And most of us don't have mental health training, psychological training. Yes, we might do mental health first aid. We might have practical workplace training, but we are not mental health professionals. Now, I do understand that some of us might be, but we also might not be hired as mental health professionals in the workplace if we work in HR, people development, learning and development, equality, diversity and inclusion, organizational development, etc. We may be doing mental health volunteer work. We may be wanting to transition, but we have to think about what our role in the workplace is. So when HR or HR professionals or HR teams blur the line between support and therapy, it's really difficult. So one of the examples of this is giving personal advice. If I were you, I would do this. For example, marriage advice, or dipping into counseling, or starting to diagnose people, unless, of course, you have specific training as a clinical psychologist on diagnosing neurodivergent conditions. But very few people have that. And again, is it in their role to do the diagnostic assessment? It also creates dependencies. Employees might expect HR to fix personal issues. And indeed, that will also might be the case with managers, and also students relying on tutors or academic professionals. And unfortunately, this then can lead to unrealistic expectations and resentment and upset. Now, I understand why people want to help, and many of us are kind of born helpers. But what can happen is we can become enablers. Some of this terminology, I think, has been overused. But of course, someone wants to help. But then what happens is the person in a difficult situation can become over-reliant and not use their own autonomy, or think about the fact that, yes, this is really difficult, but I do have some agency in this. And also it can violate any compliance. In some organizations, in some parts of the world, offering undisclosed advice or bordering on counseling can break any kind of duty of care regulation. So here we can sort of summarize it like this. If there's emotional avoidance, we're not acknowledging the person in front of us and what's going on, and we say, I'm not qualified to help. We may not be, but the problem is then the organizational impact is missed crises, compliance failures, and people feeling like, well, don't go to HR, they're never going to bother to help you. There is also then on the other side, over-empathizing. Oh my gosh, poor you, this is really awful, jumping in. And then the professional is likely to get burnout if they're doing this for several people. The individual who is going through a tough time may become too reliant, and that can also result in problems of miscommunication, misunderstanding, and boundaries about roles. Then there's avoiding boundaries, and the result of this is people can think, well, they don't care, they're just kind of avoiding the whole situation. This can then result in legal risks, unfairness, and chaos, particularly if things go to tribunal, as we heard in the last episode about the two really big cases where people won a lot of money for potentially negligence and HR not following policies and procedures. There can also be role confusion. Is HR my friend, or do they not like me? I'm really confused. And there's loss of credibility, there's strategic drift, and people not knowing when they can and can't go to HR and the kind of support they'll receive. And then finally, it could be there's someone in an HR team who's desperately trying to do everything because they need everyone to like them. Or maybe HR as a team is led by someone who is from that mindset. What happens is there's policy inconsistency potentially. If you're trying to get everyone to like you, maybe things that should always be an element of flexibility, but too much flexibility and low morale, and also very muddled boundaries. So I hope you're enjoying the content of this podcast and want to keep up to date. If you are, then why not join my bi-monthly newsletter? When you join my mailing list, you can now choose a download you would like. Just go to diverseminds.co.uk/downloads and choose the resource that works best for you. Okay, so there's quite a lot here. So what can we actually do? Does it feel like there's too much? I think that one of the things I should say is that boundaries and this kind of boundary mindset really is dependent on culture. So our individual culture, our country culture, and the culture that we work in, and effectively our team culture as well. And it's not always easy to do. And I think it's a lot easier to set boundaries in the workplace than it is in the family place, because we have policies and procedures and contracts that list what we should and shouldn't do. Families don't really have this, but there are things we can do. So the first thing is to build a comprehensive resource list for yourself. Now, if you don't work in HR and you're listening to this, this could also be for you as a manager, and keep it up to date with internal and external resources. So this could include your employee assistance program, if you have one, any phone lines, the phone website, how to access occupational health, local mental health resources. And in the UK, we have so many. So we have Samaritans, we have Calm, we have Shout text line, we have Sane line, we have Papyrus. I mean, there's so many. We're so lucky here. Some lists about financial and legal advice services. This could include citizens advice. It could include money helplines. It could include websites. And of course, having to hand internal policies like flexible working requests, bereavement leave, and make sure, particularly if you work in HR, you know those policies very, very well. And really ideally in a team, we should be making a log of how the policies have been applied with some flexibility. Of course, using phrases and things like, this sounds really tough, this sounds like you're going through a lot. We do have an employee assistance program that can help. It's free and confidential and available 24/7. Shall I give you further details? Would you like more information? You could also say, would you like me to sit here with you while you make a phone call and book your first appointment? And I also say this to managers. Now, some people might say, that doesn't sound very boundaried. But I would say that if someone is making the call themselves and you're just sitting with them for moral support and not doing it for them, it also shows that I'm here if you need me. Maybe, they might need a code, or they might need an access code. Often that's the case. Then I am here. Listening, of course, is absolutely essential. And to find out more about active listening and the art of listening to support someone, check out episode 97. And that's just 12 minutes. And it goes through the art of listening to support someone. Then, of course, there's what we call I say we, but it was developed by the coach Jackie Arnold, the ERR model, which stands for emotions, reality, responsibility. So in essence, when emotions are high, we want to, whether we're managers or HR, we want to acknowledge that. So I can see you're upset. I can see you're angry. I can see you're frustrated. And this really helps with the boundary avoidance, because we need to be able to name the emotion, or I can see that this is really difficult for you. For those of us who find it easier to name emotions than others, it can just say, "Oh, I'd like you to carry on. I can see that you want to talk about this. Let's carry on talking if you've got the capacity to do this." Now, you could say, "Well, why am I encouraging someone to talk? Because this is just going to make this worse." It depends on what the situation is. If it's a very serious abuse, serious mental ill health or crisis case, and we're not trained to manage that, of course, we need to say, okay, I am not able to deal with this because my training doesn't enable me to, but I absolutely can see that I need to get you some help and support today. So that is what I'm going to do. When I say encouraging someone to keep talking, it might be that someone said, well, I just need to talk to you and I've got a bullying line manager and I don't know what to do. I can see you're really frustrated about this. When you say bullying line manager, what do you mean? So that's a case where we would maybe want someone to speak a bit more, because bullying means different things to different people. And as HR professionals, you probably need to understand some more about that before you kind of delve into it. So it's acknowledging the emotion and asking the person how they are, giving them space to download and speak about their emotions. And then we move to reality. And reality is, I realize this has really affected you. Do you want to continue or speak another time? I can see that you're really angry, anxious, upset, concerned, and use their word as much as you can. Would you like to take a few moments to reconvene? I realize this is a difficult situation. What would you like to happen now? And that kind of really puts someone in the driving seat. And if someone's unable to continue and you have occupational health on site or counseling, or ask if they need their next of kin phoned, as they may want to just get out of the workplace. And this also keeps us away from the rescuer role and in the kind of adult mode that and boundaried, if you like. And then you move to responsibility. And this is if they would like to, if they can and they're able to continue, is to ask something like, okay, so what are the facts of this situation? Reflect their words back to them. What will enable you to move forward right now? What will support your well-being during this process or right now? Would you like to meet again to discuss? Now, that might be more the case if you're a line manager than HR, or I can meet again to discuss on this time and date, and we can focus on bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. And reflect what you've heard back and summarize what's been agreed. So that's also a way of supporting in a boundaried way. Okay, so what's next? The third thing is training managers properly and regularly to ensure they have the mental health training they need. And I touched on this last week as well. There are several very senior leaders and managers who are very scared of these conversations and want HR to take it all on. Now, HR, of course, has a role in this, but managers do have to come forward, step forward and manage this in the first instance. And it can really stop things from escalating. But of course, that can only happen when people are trained properly, regularly, and are aware of all the resources and processes and systems, including emergency processes that are available. So this also is important if you've got a comprehensive resource list as HRs, to be sharing that with managers and getting agreement on that. So that's one thing. And making sure that you work with your organizational development, learning development, and equality, diversity, and inclusion teams to ensure that you get the trainers that are going to be right for the organization and have the right accreditations and are licensed to deliver training in mental health first aid or any other mental health support. But this really is crucial, because I think so many people can go through the workplace, they can get to a very senior level and they don't know how to manage mental health proactively or mental ill health when they have to do something. And that training should also include phased returns, well-being action plans, etc. Okay, the fourth thing is about getting counseling or therapy yourself. So whoever you are, but this episode is specifically about HR. So to understand your own reactions. And there's a really great article in HR Magazine from November 22, which is entitled HR is not your therapist, but it needs one. And in this article, it says, quote, "It turns out the entire people HR field is tired. Not only that, but it felt like people at every level, including global corporate chief people officers, were admitting they felt totally unsupported while essentially operating as unqualified therapists for thousands of employees across the world." So this is clearly in big corporate. So really interesting. And I thought, if this is the trade industry magazine and they're saying this, yes, I know it's from 2022, but still, this is really important. And it can help us see our own patterns. If we are doing things like, if we're from an emotionally avoidant family, are we bringing that emotional avoidance into work? If we are avoiding boundaries, were we told off when we said no? If we are over-empathizing, did we have to fix all the problems in our environment growing up? If there is role confusion, was there a lot of chaos growing up? If we feel that we have to people please, was it very hard to get people to see us? Now, I'm not saying you have to do this, and this will resonate, I'm sure, with most people. We all have certain tendencies and ways of behaving due to the way in which we grew up and the kind of environment we were in. but this does seep and leak into the workplace. And I've talked about this a lot. So I would definitely say get counseling or therapy yourself for lots of reasons. And we normally have many things going on in our life aside from work, but you might like to think about doing that. That can then help your professional practice. And then linked to that is number 5, which is about get coaching training. So you don't have to become a full coach, but coaching training is so useful, even if it's basic coaching skills. So as an HR person, you're not jumping in, you're not getting into that drama triangle, but you're going more to David Emerald's empowerment triangles. So we're moving away from the drama into the adult mode, away from the rescuer mode. And we can start to think about how we can be the coach and say to someone, how will you do it? So the supporting, assisting and facilitating the desired outcome. So, and the ERR model really helps with that as well. But if we get proper coaching skills, this becomes much more natural and we can start to flip away from the, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? To, okay, what stopped you? What would you like to happen next? What's the most difficult thing about this? And someone can really start to come up with their own solutions. We can also think about, encouraging others. You can do this. You can make the phone call to the EAP. I can sit here if you need me to. When you're ready for me to go, I will go. And the fact that you can do it as an individual as well. So the empowerment dynamic is about the creator, the coach, and the challenger. Really helpful, I think, and it's the reverse of the drama triangle, which is the persecutor, who's the bully, and it might be the persecutor might be an policy, procedure or criterion as well. The victim, the person who feels stuck or feels in a difficult situation, and the rescuer, the person who is keen to help and they overhelp without knowing. And many of us have grown up in environments where we've had to overhelp. So it feels very familiar and we don't know when we're doing it. Hence point 4, which is get counseling or therapy for yourself to understand some of this. But yes, coaching skills, if you don't want to be a full coach, that's completely understandable, but really useful. Or it could also be action learning set facilitation skills, because that has those positive questioning in it as well. So empathy is vital for all roles, but really is extremely important for HR, but needs to be tempered with realistic limits. Staff members have difficult situations, but they need to feel empowered to make their own choices. Be very clear and know your own policies, procedures, and resources and what could help, and have them to hand. And find out more, inquire about yourself and your behavior to get the support you need and understand your behaviors in the workplace. So I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget, I run workshops, training sessions, and keynotes for organizations about creating positive, happy, and equal workplaces on many topics, one of which is being a mental well-being supporter and having boundaries. If you want to get in touch with me to find out more, you can email me at Leyla, Leyla at diverseminds.co.uk. Really hope you've enjoyed today's show and shows over the last 6 years. And if you have, why not write me a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast from. And I'd love to hear from you. So why not leave me an anonymous voice note or with your name at bit.ly/SPKPDMP. Don't forget my TEDx talk about my experience of navigating culture, race, and mental health in the workplace. And that link is TEDx Wolves, WOLVESLO. And the resources for today's show are The Art of Listening to Support Someone, episode 97, and HR Magazine's HR is Not Your Therapist, but It Needs One. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope to connect with you in 2 weeks' time, where I'll be talking about why your organization needs to stop using non-disclosure agreements. Until then, take care. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.